everyone, and welcome back to Inside ArtScroll, where the books you read and the people who write them come to life. Today I am privileged to be joined by Rabbi Fishel Schachter, noted maggid shiur, rebbi, marbitz Torah, author, speaker, writer, storyteller, in honor of the release of his brand new book, Did This Ever Happen to You? A brand new ArtScroll book. Thank you, Rabbi Schachter, for being here.
My pleasure. How did you remember all those things?
All those titles of yours.
Yeah.
Can I know her? You do wear many hats.
Yeah, I don't want to be jack of, what does it say?
Jack of all trades, a master of none.
Okay.
Can I know her, Rabbi Schachter?
Right.
You're a jack of many trades, and you're a master of them all, apparently. You're mashpi on many people.
I think everyone is a master in their own right, and the yisata d'shmaya in life is to find out where you're good at and stay away where you're not good at.
Well, you're reaching many people through many different mediums.
Right.
Is this your first book?
There once was an ArtScroll book with Chofetz Chaim.
Chofetz Chaim Heritage Foundation,
a while
right?
ago, right?
On Shmuris Haloshen.
On hashgachah. Close enough, right? But that was quite a few years ago.
Right. So this book really brings out your personality, if I may say. You have a column that you write in the Hamotia.
Correct. Indian magazine.
Indian magazine, which is very popular. Mm-hmm. And this is it's that style of messages combined with stories and a lot of humor. I must tell you that reading it, I've been laughing a lot. And sitting in this chair, very often when I interview people, I talk about books that are inspiring. It's not so often that I talk about an ArtScroll book that's also very, very funny. So for the viewers out there, they should know that this brand new book not only is inspirational, but it has a great dose of humor.
So I tell people it's not so much that I have a sense of humor, it's just these things happen to me. So it's just...
I don't know if they don't happen to other people.
Right,
but
Hashem writes my script, right. Right.
So
it's a good feeling to make people laugh, it really is.
And you do that live and now in writing as well?
Right, and somebody once approached me and said, what about litzonos, and what about, is it proper, is it mockery? And I asked my Rav, and he told me a member from the old school rebbi, the Noam Eliezer, who said once that there's a very fine line between bitachon, which how would you translate bitachon, which someone's getting up and just making people happy, and which is of course positive, and litzonos, which is ultimately negative.
Right.
And he said that whenever you say a line or a story, have in mind three things. One is to make sure that it's not in someone else's cheshbon, no one else is being hurt over here. Mm-hmm. That you're delicately, you're not in terms of a class of people or individuals. I mean, you say Galiciana, Polish, English, that's kind of acceptable. But no one really should have any angst nefesh. You really have to scan and filter, and I try to do. No one is going to walk away from here slightly hurt, even if they say they're not. Second is that it should be totally clean. And when I say clean, obviously I don't mean more than clean. It has to be edel, it has to be fine. Mm-hmm. And the third is that you really want to make people happy. You really want to make people happy, because happy Yidden are good Yidden. And it's it's a psichos alev, you open their heart for what's coming afterwards. And I try. I mean, we're not perfect, but I really try to scan those three things.
And you do it quite effectively, and apparently people appreciate it because you do speak all over the world, and you're able to address all different types of audiences. Growing up, did you envision yourself as being this globe-trotting marbitz Torah speaker, and what was it like growing up? What did you think you were?
Maybe the globe-trotting part, but not the marbitz Torah speaker. I was zeicher to it. I don't know. I probably was chus avos or my mother's tears, my parents, supporting family, everything else. Or maybe it's like Hashem said, listen, this is what you have to do in this world. I don't try to do anything else, okay? Because I'm just going to push you right back into it.
Right. Where did you grow up? What's your background?
So I was actually born in Crown Heights. People say to me, what was your first speaking event? I'm sorry, I didn't want to take away your other question.
No, go ahead.
They always say what I heard from Ramat Chamalach. He said once, my first time I addressed an audience was by my chumash student when I was 3 years old, when I got up and said, Vayikra. No, I grew up in Bar Park, essentially.
And you went to yeshiva?
So I started out in, there was a yeshiva called Beis Yehuda, which was under the Debretziner Rav. And there I went to Beis Yitzchak for a while, and I was in Ber Shmuel, and then in Beis Medrash in Tarvadas. Mm-hmm.
And you basically haven't really left Tarvadas since then?
No, I haven't really left Tarvadas. Tarvadas is a hard place to leave, yeah.
Who did you learn under in Tarvadas?
So I was zeicher to learn by Rav Elia Chazan for 2 years. I mean, I sat there, okay. I don't know if I learned, I was listening to the words. I heard a lot of words, I listened. I got an image of what it used to be, and I was zeicher to be Rav Palm.
Wow.
And Li Bala Mechaim L'chaim the Mashgiach, Rav Wolfson. So those are very special. Rav Belsky also was someone that I think changed my life. Belsky actually gave a homiletics course. And I think I was 16 or 17 years old, and he got up to say my Dvar Torah, and he told me, okay, you're going to have to stick with this. And I thought it was a nice thing to say, but I guess nice things that you have to take very seriously, nice things to say sometimes.
Now, homiletics course meaning what was that in essence?
Yeah, in essence, it was to teach people how to address a rabbin.
Wow.
Rabbi Schachter used to do it in Tervadas.
Almost like an oratory course?
That's officially what it was.
That's what it was?
Yeah, somebody was sponsoring it, but it really was kind of a shiur. So everyone got up and said it's
And you got a hashgachah for Belsky, said that you have a talent.
You got to keep doing this. You got to keep doing it. You got to keep doing it.
So he recognized that early on.
He recognized that early on. And Rav Belsky had a lot of Russians coming to the yeshiva and doing night classes, and he said, no, you go here and go there. And I said, I can't do this. He didn't take no for an answer.
Mm-hmm. And eventually, what came first, teaching in the classroom or speaking publicly for you?
People always say that to me. I'm not sure. I never really, not good chronicles. My father, I was a ben yachid. I was born after 12 years.
Wow.
Okay. 10 years or 12 years, one of the two, I'm not sure, but somewhere along the lines. My parents were sole survivors, both of them were sole survivors. Really? So you can imagine what they went through in those 12 years.
Wow.
And there's a story that I've said it so many times, I'm probably coming out of people's ears, but just to kick things off. If people want, they can fast forward through parts of the interview.
They could skip through the interview.
They can just close it.
100%.
Right? That's how I always feel about these interviews. A live shiur, I have hachnanas on the people. Here, I'm not forcing you to listen.
No, we don't force people to listen. Right. We hope that they're listening for their leisure.
Right.
And we hope it's enjoyable enough that they're not jumping back.
Right. So I know you may have heard the story. There was an old man who used to live on my block, and I taught him how to use one of the hotlines called Lush, and he said he doesn't have patience. I said you can fast forward. I showed him how you can fast forward a shiur. And I came back after a while, and he said, it's not happening, it's not working. And I said, no, you're listening to a live shiur. You cannot fast forward a live shiur. It's only a recorded shiur. He says, you told me it works. I said, Anyway, so after I think it was 12 years, my mother, Leil Shalom, there was no organizations that really helped with fertility and so on. And she had gone to a doctor on Park Avenue, and the doctor said to Mr. Schachter, there's nothing else to do. And she tried to argue, and this is what he said to her. He said, when hair will grow on the palm of my hand, you're going to have a child. It was the end of the conversation. And she walked out, and she was quite dejected. And she said she felt it wasn't just she and it wasn't just my mother and my father. It was all her grandparents, her whole extended family. They were the sole survivors. And she got onto the Madison Avenue bus, and she said, I'm never getting off this bus. And the bus just went back and forth and back and forth. Toward the end of the day, the driver got up and said, ma'am, you got to get off the bus. And she said, no, I'm not getting off the bus. And she always said, he took off his hat and he goes, Mrs., I don't know what your problem is, okay? But it's not going to get better if you sleep in a bus garage. Get off the bus and get on with your life. So she felt that was like a message from Shemayim. Mm-hmm. And she said, you know what, Rabbi Shalom, I'm not the one that decides what I'm doing with my life or how I'm doing with it, and I'll do what I have to do. And she got off the bus and said, whatever's going to be is going to be. And I was born a year later.
Wow.
So my father really pumped me with a lot of stories as a ben yachid, and I didn't. There was no such a thing as me going to sleep without story after story after
so
story.
You grew up with it.
I grew up with it. It was like my heroes were the Rebbe Zisha and the Rebbe Melech and the Baal Shem Tov and the Chavetz Chaim, and it was just again and again and again and again, and it was kind of something that was.
Now your style of storytelling, which probably works very well in the classroom,
right? So, again, you can't eat ice cream 3 for 3. You can't serve ice cream three courses. Right. Uh-huh. It works if you know how to apply it properly. Uh-huh. So I was very into stories. Was part of my life. And the Shabbos table, we had a lot of guests. My father, again, another story which some of you have heard from me, maybe one time too many. My father, during the war, he was in Shanghai, which is a whole different story. It was not for now, but they wound up in Vilna running from place to place, and they hadn't eaten in days, and they sat down by this yid, and he cut up some challah, and the boys took the challah, and he started yelling, I didn't tell you you can get out of here. He probably didn't have enough to go around, and they walked out, and they were quite displeased with him. They hadn't eaten in days, and my father said, you know what, Hashem? He said, look, I have no ties in anyone. If I live through the war, then I will not wash without a guest. That was a promise that he made, and he kept that promise. Wow. And we almost always had guests. Almost always. We had steady people, wonderful people, Shiva Bachrim and different yeshivas. And there were times that if we didn't have, my father would go down to Shabbos on the corner of the shul, there were all kinds of different members of Klal Yisrael, and he would bring back a variety of very different kinds of people.
Wow.
So I grew up really with all kinds of people around the table. And I think that gave me a certain understanding of I never had a shoebox on top of me. I think it was always wide open, and that was a Kadosh Baruch Hu, part of a Kadosh Baruch Hu's plan, I think, to opened up a kind of broader way of understanding who people are.
Right. Now, you started teaching in the classroom how many years after you were married? When did you start teaching?
So actually what came first was Dial Daf.
Oh, okay.
That came first. And that's a fascinating story on its own.
So before you tell the Dial Daf story, I want to share a memory of my own.
Okay.
About 25 years ago, I don't know if I'm dating myself, when I was a bacher in Yeshiva Torah Tamima, there was a new cycle of Daf Yomi.
I wish I could say that 25 years ago when I was a bacher.
You were a bacher.
Dating yourself. I'd say 45 years ago. Okay.
So I decided to do Daf Yomi, which
Remember
is
when
a
we
long...
used to think if you're 40, you're old?
Yes,
Yeah, I do. Remember those days, yeah. Anyway.
I decided that I wanted to do Daf Yomi, which is a little unconventional for the mainstream yeshiva system, and I didn't stick with it all the way through, but at least at the beginning. And so I had an ArtScroll Gemara, but I wanted to listen to a shiur. And this is pre the app days and pre-Kol. There were various options. Dial Daf was around, but I remember driving my bike down 18th Avenue to the Mr. Applebaum's Torah tape library. I think it was Rebbi Applebaum. I think it was 50th Street, 50th and 18th, something like that.
Between 18th and the dead end.
Between 18th and the dead end.
Right.
Second house off the corner, I think. And I remember I went in, I got the tapes for the first, let's say, 10 blot of brachas. And I remember bringing it back to yeshiva, Ben Astarim. I sit down with my little tape recorder.
It was $1 a tape, right?
I think it was $1 a tape.
And when you gave it back, you got back a quarter.
You got back
75 cents.
75 cents.
Right.
Got back 75 cents. And unless you were trading it in, I think you were able to keep going weiter. You didn't have to give more money.
Right.
And I sit down and I put...
He didn't make the Forbes top 10 by selling his
definitely
tapes.
not.
On this one, up there, yeah.
Up there for sure. Rabbi Applebaum was not...
Yeah, this was...
We're not doing
this
it for the money.
Life, yes.
This was his Olam Haba. And I remember putting it to the tape recorder and I turn it on.
You have to explain what a tape recorder is.
to the viewers.
Yes. Okay. Anyway, yeah.
I turn it on and there you are. Rabbi Fishel Schachter. It was you. You welcomed me into the world of Daf Yomi 25 years ago. Soft, soothing voice. I don't remember exactly what you said, but I remember you said something about the fact that
people always say that. I remember your jokes. I don't remember the shiur, but okay, at least by association.
It was an unbelievable schus that nowadays there are many Daf Yomi maggid shiur, all of them fantastic.
Unbelievable,
really,
one better than the other.
They're super, but really you were from the pioneer Daf Yomi maggid shiur.
In English, they were in Yiddish.
In English, right. In English.
So I'll tell you a cute story. I was once on a plane, and I was sitting next to someone, and he was telling me that he grew up in a quasi from school, but he had one rebbi that was really very, very into kiruv. And he, you remember those days in class when you would listen to a thing, you had a thing in your ear, and the wire, you would run the wire through your sleeve.
I'm not going to admit that I know of.
So this way you could kind of sit in class like this, and it looked like you were learning. Anyway, so he said he was listening to Frank Sinatra, which is not, I can't argue. We heard, that was okay. And his rebbi looked at him and said, "What are you listening to?" And, I'm not really listening to anything, whatever. And he said, so he said his punishment was he had to sit the entire lunch and listen to a Daf Yomi shiur. So the kid I was hardly from, you know what I mean? And he said he popped in one of my tapes, and he's listening. All of a sudden he bursts out laughing. So the rebbi accused him of changing the tape to some comedian. He said, did you change the tape? He said, no, I didn't, honestly. What are you laughing? I said, well, you listen, And I remember even the joke I made, but we'll leave it for now. But so he said it was you, and you started with a milsa. Right, yeah. And he said that you should know that got him into learning, listening. He said, "You have any more of these Gemara shiurim?" And he said that he's been learning Daf Yomi pretty much off and on since then. Yeah, but that really got his interest. Now he himself is a mashpia.
Wow. Now I cut you off. You were about to tell. How did you get hooked up with Dialed after you started delivering a Daf Yomi shiur?
Okay, so here's an interesting story, and I think it's an important lesson. Also, I think it may be in the book somewhere. I don't remember. But I was in Camp Tarvadas. Remember Camp Tarvadas? No, you don't remember Camp Tarvadas.
I was very young.
Very young.
Yeah.
There was a camp called Camp Tarvadas. It was the camp. This was the camp. This was the place to be. And there were two parts to the camp. The one part was where the counselors were, and the other part was the masmidim and the holy part, and the part that was making other kids holy. Everything was holy, but just in different ways. And I was learning, all day, because whatever, I was, a masmid, supposedly. But I loved plays and I loved stories. And when Kalua came, I would sneak over the fence and I would help them. And once they offered me to be like some kind of lieutenant, something in color war, and in those days, color wars, it was different. It was like, you can't imagine what it was like. I mean, the people that won color war were on a high the rest of their lives. The purple, the ones that lost and needed therapy, they were like gone. They were like, you see 25-year-old people, kids crying, was like, and they offered me to really be part of the play in some position, and I was so excited, but they said I have to ask the mashgiach and Rabbi Fishel Schachter, and because officially I belong to the other side. So I went over to him and I said, it really bothers me, the stories they have today for color war. Everything's about shooting and detectives, and what's with the good old Baal Shem Tov stories and the flying wagons? So he said, yeah. So therefore I just want to go I'm going to go in and I'm going to straighten it out. Notice I avoided asking the question, I just wanted to come. But he was a couple of years ahead of me, and he said, okay, but what does that have to do with you? I said, uh-oh. So I started again, it's like all everything today is with shooting and with guns. I understand, what does that have to do with you? So I said, I want to be part of the plays. So he said, for whatever reason, that it was like 3 days of no learning and no davening and no eating and the environment. And he said, whatever, where I was coming from, and I don't think you should do it. I remember my heart almost fell out of my thing. And I started to argue, and he said to me, this is a good rule in chinuch, he said to me, okay, so do what you want. And I was stuck. So he would have said, don't you dare do it. And if you do it, you're going to be thrown out of camp. So there's that bacher in me that would have said, okay, let's see if he throws me out,
Right.
But because he said, okay, so do what you want, that meant that what I was doing, I was defining myself.
Right.
I'm not going to stop you. You asked me, I'm telling you. So I was stuck. I told him I'm resigning, and it was very, very difficult for me. It was a 17-year-old. I was a good boy. I sat and learned. It's not like I tried, but it was hard for me to learn. This would have been my chance, for fame, and there can't be any greater cover than color war in camp. Right? Couldn't think higher than that. And I sat in the mitzvos for 3 days and I cried like a baby. And I remember, so I opened up a mishnayos, I remember, and it was pre-Shabbos as a para, okay? And I was just started learning, and I said, I'm going to be here for 3 days because I couldn't bear to see everyone else
having a good time.
Having a good time. It was just, we had a good time on the other side of the fence also, but just this was my chance, And I remember I said, I'm not going to sit here and klutz for 3 days, and I started to learn, and something opened up in my mind in learning. Because I'm not going to say I never learned till then, but I learned all the Taisus Yom Tov, Rabbi Kiva Eggers, and I looked up every single thing. And something happened in those 3 days. Okay, I survived it, believe it or not. I survived the post-trauma, and the summer was over, and life went on. So fast forward that year, Rabbi Talansky was a dormitory mashgiach Shabbos Lechter Granate, and he came over to me and said, they were looking for an older bacher to give a shiur to some of the younger bacher. And mishnayos between supper and night seder, and I said, could I learn Perik Shosh as a par? He said, learn whatever you want. And I learned with them. We had a bunch of kids. They're very chash. Some of them by far outgrew me in many different ways. There was one kid that was struggling and he was crying, and I felt so bad for him. I said, I am going to make, I'm going to make a tape for you. And I made a tape of the mishnayos I knew, Shnas Apar. And I gave him the tape, and he was listening to it, and it helped. It felt good, and that passed. Okay. So now chapter 3. Fast forward, I'm married, and Eli Teitelbaum has this great idea. And people are going to call in and hear a shiur. It was unheard of. I want to say, never mind that there were no cell phones then, there were no home computers.
Right.
This is before home computers. There was none, right? It was
we're talking about 1980s, right? Now, right?
Yeah.
Early 80s. Yeah.
We're talking
Probably.
about 40 years ago.
40 years ago. Yeah.
You know what it means, no cell phone? I'll tell you what it means. It means when you made a bracha in the morning, Shalom Yasani Aved, it was not a bracha levatala. That's what it meant. And the Yetzer Hara had his ways, by the way. We weren't Yetzer Hara free. Don't think that. He always. So, but he had this idea: you're going to call in and listen to a shiur, and he walked into his place. It looked like, I don't know how to explain it. It looked like some kind of mad laboratory. A bunch of
in his basement. Right?
Basement.
I should mention Rabbi Teitelbaum was my rebbi.
There you go.
Fourth grade rebbi. Yeah. So we
Rebbe of Klal Yisrael. There was like a bunch of tape recorders piled up, and the lines went in, and there were cassette tapes turning and flipping, and there was a whole. And everyone said it's not going to work. It was his own contraption of calling him. And it worked. The system worked, and you only heard the daf at the beginning of the hour. In other words,
Right.
if you called in,
You had to call in because
if you called in a quarter after, you were 15 minutes into the daf. And then I thought maybe I can do a daf. And I was just, oh my, nothing. I was a young young man. So I, by mistake, not so by mistake, left the cassette tape with the mishnayos on his desk. And I said, let's see what happens. And the next day I came by, happened to come by, left my handkerchief there or something, how it goes. And he said to me, like, when a shadchan says, don't call me, I'll call you, that's kind of what he said. I said, okay, I tried, And then, fast forward, so they're up to Masechtas Moed Katan, and I walk in there at night, I'm way home from night seder, and of course my wife thought I was my night seder the entire time, right? Of course. I stopped her for a minute, yeah. And I walked in there just to see, help out. Listen, helping out with Torah is also learning, right?
Sure.
I help out with it, and I walked in there, and there was a showdown. There was a man who said he doesn't want to do Perik Elu Megalchen, which is the Perik in Moed Katan that deals with the halachas of mourning and avelis, and he said, I don't want to do it, because it's a bad omen. So Eli said, you want to skip it? It's part of Shas. What do you mean? So he said, he'll do the whole Masechta, so it gets swallowed in, but he won't just do this Perik exclusively. So Eli said to him, but other people already worked on the entire Masechta. I can't take it away from him. Well, he said, if you don't give me the whole Masechta, I'm taking back my tapes. He had his tapes in a bag, and I'm walking out with them. Now, Eli Talban was the wrong person to threaten, okay? So he says, I'll leave. He said, you're not going to have the tapes, so leave. You're not going to have the tapes, so leave. So he said, I'm going. He said, go, And he left. And I said, Eli, what are you going to do? And he looked at me and said, like Schachter, the saying in Yiddish, when the makom she'ein ish is herring oich fish, if there's no one around. He said, give it a whirl. Go for it. So I was up the entire night. First of all, I was scared. I was really scared. Well, it was something big. It's a hot potato. So,
It's like getting the tzedakah.
Yeah. So the rebbi just moved into Borough Park that night. It was the first night I think he was open to the public. And I went to ask him. He said, do it. So I said to him, but is it a bad thing? Is it chas v'sham? He said, no, anything in Torah is bracha. It doesn't make a difference. Hilchas avelis, hilchas pinya petach amar, hilchas chanukah. It doesn't make a difference. Just you do it. So I said to him, when Chasam Sofer fasted, when he learned daily magalchen. So he told me Chasam Sofer fasted, when he learned daily treifus. Chasam Sofer had his inyanim, but I'm telling you, you're good. You're good to go. Okay, he gave me the bracha. And I was up the entire night and did it and redid it and redid it and redid it. And there it was. And I gave it to him, and it just had a certain chen, had a certain siyat d'shmai. And all of a sudden I was good to go as part of the rotation.
Wow.
But I always think, I could have said to the mashgiach then, I could have said, well, he told me I can do what I want, right? Mm-hmm. And I would have acted in the play, and I would have reached my fame, you know what I mean? And then I would have been, I don't know, working on a computer someplace the rest of my life. Wow. I wouldn't be good at it. Wow. So you got to be careful for those moments in life where Hashem gives you an opportunity, and it usually comes with some level of sacrifice.
Or disappointment.
Right. So you got to look, and I think that's to a great degree the theme of the book. Take those disappointments and convert them, because underneath there are usually switches to bracha, to where you are.
Now, it's an interesting question I ask whenever I'm zeichet to have mechanchim in this chair, which I've been fortunate to have over the past few years. I asked them, what do you find the difference is in being mechanech when you started, which is a few decades ago, to today? What do you find to be the major difference in terms of the children that you're dealing with?
Right. So I wish I had $1 for every time I heard that question in my life. Honestly, it's just that the Yetzer Hara changes his cloak.
Guys.
Right. But we had our annoyances and we had our tests. And I remember there was I think kids are kids. Technology definitely changed the face of it. What a kid can do, walking into a bathroom when no one is looking, holding it on his phone and locks the door, and where he would have to have traveled to Manhattan or to travel to where else. So that's obvious. But having said that, the Yetzer Hara was always here, and kids were always kids. Mm-hmm. And I think, if anything, chinuch has changed radically for the better. The whole mahalach, what a classroom looks like and what we're doing with kids. And unfortunately, I'm not in denial of those that are falling out. But I think that if you look at those that are staying in and those that are coming around, I think chinuch is honestly, do I see a real difference in kids? I said that the Chayzer said before Mashiach is going to come that the Dar HaMabel could have been the Dar of Mashiach, and they blew it, right? The 40 days of rain could have been Kabbalah Satira. And then they came down again as the Dar HaMidbar, but they couldn't be Mashiach because it's not fair. You're surrounded by Anani Kavitz. So before Mashiach is going to come, Hashem is going to send Dar HaMabel and Dar HaMidbar in one generation. And you'll have to sort it out, and that's going to be the goal. And I think that's what we have today. In a way, we have Torah like we never had before. We have kids that have a cheshik to learn. We have kids that want to learn. You have fathers that are talmidei chachamim, and you have yeshivas, and you have the mitzvos Torah, and you have ArtScroll, and you have the ability to learn and everything else. And on the other hand, there are tests that there never was. So I don't think anything is different today. I think it's just an accumulation of all the yetzitovs of the generations and the yetzihara of the generation. And Hashem says, sort it out now, because this is it. We're up
The
against
perception, anyway, I think the general perception is that it's harder than ever because the children don't have the sitzfleisch they used to have.
That's true. That's true.
Their
but
attention span is shorter,
remember
and so on and so
teaching
forth.
35 years ago that it was so easy.
Yeah.
So
No, but that's refreshing to hear. That if you feel that kids are kids and what worked then will work
I
now.
think our kids are kids.
Kids are kids.
What I always tell the kids is that God wasn't taken by surprise. People say, technology, smartphones, internet, there never was such a thing. Torah is in danger. Whatever. Rabbi Hashem creates everything. He created this. So why would he do that? I said, I don't know. Why did he make wars? Why is there a Spanish Inquisition? I said, why did your great-grandfather struggle with Shmir Shabbos? Every generation from Har Sinai till Mashiach has its challenges. This is by design our challenge. It's not that Hashem was taken by surprise. This is our challenge. We're going to take it and go with it and do our best with it. And this is our bracha to the world. This is by plan. I think it's important.
And that's an important message for kids to hear.
Yeah.
Now, when you speak to adults, typically, you go around, you're invited for a Shabbos or to speak at events. Is there a particular topic that you find that you're speaking about it again and again? Is there a universal message that you try to share? How do you typically, if you're speaking at a mitzvos event, so you're going to speak about the mitzvos, you speak about chinuch, you speak about chesed, whatever that organization.
In other words, money, right? Yeah, I get it. Yes,
In other words, money, exactly.
Right.
But when you go away for Shabbos, you're speaking multiple times over a Shabbos. What generally is your message?
So Shabbos, we're in a camp. Sometimes there are themes. We want to stay around the theme. But I think the real thing is just to see the Rabbi Shalom in our lives. I think that's what it is. People always ask me, how come you have stories? How come I don't have stories? And the answer is, I said, we do. You just have to see it. You just have to see it. Feel the hashgachah pratis. Just feel that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you're not a number. Hashem created you. He knows who you are. He's behind you. He's watching you. He's rooting for you. He's invested in you. And then begin to see it in your lives. And then just take everyday life and apply it.
Which is really what you do. That's really what you do in this book, very much. We're talking about real life scenarios. Most of the stories are things that happen to you. They're not just stories that you heard. And you bring out that human element and the hashgachah part of it.
And people always say, you created a story. There's no real story. You created the story. I said, no, there is a story. Most people don't see it.
Right.
But there is a story.
But that's what's so charming about it, that you're able to bring it out in a very, very human way.
Right.
And in a very, very humorous way, which is what makes it very special. And I think that's why, especially nowadays, when people are very weighed down, I think that is a difference maybe from the years ago that we were talking about. Maybe chinuch is similar. I do think the arum and arum of our lives are different in that people are much more harried now and much more under stress. I've asked people of the previous dar if they agree, and they agreed. They agreed.
My mother, Shalom, used to say, in the Haim, she says, back at home, nobody made a living, but we lived. Over here, people make a living. People are making livings, but they don't live. But we're not alive, right?
Exactly.
Just take a moment to stop and think. Take a moment, take a breather, stop and think.
Right.
So Rav Segel once told somebody he went to work, he said, I want you to have special kavanah by certain words in Shemona Esrei. So he said to me in the first bracha of Shemona Esrei, he said, no, that's halacha. So when you say the words, Al Nisecha, Shebchol Yom Yimanu, the miracles that took place for you every single day. So I want you to think in your mind, make a mental note of the miracles. He said, well, if I can't find any, he said, then you're not thinking. You're not thinking. Think. And I think that, people come to me and they'll say, my Shabbos table, it's disaster. I prepare so hard. I prepared a tzais and a sivas and a drush, and I got up there, and the kids aren't sitting there. My 2-year-old is not willing to be patient. I said, And you try to describe the kids fighting and things turning over, and I said, that's what makes us laugh. That just learn how to live with it. Learn how to make it part of you. Learn how to enjoy it. Learn how to share with it. It's not supposed to be by route.
People look at you as a source of chizuk, very much.
Right.
That's what they hear from you. Inside inspiration. Do you find that there are people are coming to you with a need for chizik in particular areas? Whether it's shidduchim, shalom bayis. You mentioned before about kids falling out of the system. We'll call them kids at risk. These are all very, very parnasa is a tremendous challenge. Do you find that there are specific areas that people are being miyayitz by you? Rabbi Schachter, help me. I need a life preserver. Help me get through this nisayon.
Not just me. I think anyone that's a chinuch, and anyone that has a friend, and anyone that's
someone who has a voice like you also.
Right. Yeah, sure. People are really going through the grind.
Yeah.
People are really, really, sometimes it's you can't imagine what people are going through.
And what do you do when they come to you with that? What's your response? Just listen.
I don't have a magic wand. I always tell them, wish I had a magic wand. And I'm not going to talk down to you. I'm not going to make you believe that I am Mr. Bitachon and I don't have a problem in the world. And I said, I remember my friend once saying, when my check engine light goes in my car, I fall apart. You know what I mean? Like, and by me, it's an air tummin in my car. So, no, what I try to do is I try to validate their feelings and equate myself. I said, yeah, I go through the grind also and have my scares also. Mm-hmm. And this is how I dealt with it. And I know it's not as bad as yours. But I think what people really, really need is to listen, an ear for someone to hear them. Mm-hmm. And the vanishing works that way. Let's state in the Svarim, when I'm listening to you, the Reb Chaim Volozhiner says, and if you're listening to him and he's listening to you, Gosh says, I'll listen to you, even if you're not deserving. I think if we took the time to listen to people, and I always say it, I say it to my kids, I say it to everyone, I say it to Talmidim, how much of the day did you spend listening to someone? Not trying to find a potential customer. Just give someone the time. Just listen. We don't have people, remember you used to write letters? You used to write letters to your parents?
Sure. I actually did.
Right?
When I was in Camp Silver Lake,
yeah.
I used to write, I know this is not about me, but I used to write a card home every day. Every single day.
Wow.
For all my years in Camp Silver Lake. Talking about probably
really?
7 years.
Your mother has them?
My mother saved them.
Wow.
Then when I went to learn...
Why did you write a book?
A book of those cards.
I'll interview you.
You remember Ruchama Shane put out a book of her letters?
Yeah.
So when I went to learn ArtScroll, my brother had done this before me. I have one brother, and he wrote letters home. So when I learned in ArtScroll as a bacher, every week I would write like 5-6 pages home.
Really?
That was the beginning of my writing career.
Wow.
And my mother has them. Yeah, wow. So I did write letters.
So I remember when I was in camp, and I would write a letter to my parents. They remember when I would write when I was in Israel. I never learned it, but I was there. Remember those airmail letters, the blue airmail letters, right?
Sure.
And I would sit down to write. I said, let me be careful what I'm saying, because if I say I have a cold, my mother's gonna think I have pneumonia. Right? What I mean,
Sure.
If I say I have fever, she's gonna come running with it all. And I had to think about my parents, and I had to think what I was writing, and I was totally focused on them. And when I got a letter, it was very important to me when I got a letter from my parents. I waited at night till everybody was sleeping till I read it. And I said, but today, who writes letters? Because why write a letter, right? I remember my first son went there at Yisrael, and we were all so emotional, and we were so like, can't believe it, and he's and then when he would call, and it was like once a week, and it was more expensive, and I would think before what I'm going to say. By the time my bunch of sons down the line, it was like, okay, it's like, do me a favor, run to the corner, Tom, in your shalim. Oh, I forgot. Okay, just, because he calls me 3 times a day. It's like,
Right.
So I said, because he's so accessible in your shalim, I never had that time where I sat down to
think.
Right. Other than there's a story in the book, I say it happened to someone else, but it really happened to me, which is quite, But I remember my first son came back from Eretz Yisrael, so we were so emotional, and we hung up balloons and pictures, and we were counting down, we had chart, we counting down the days, and he begged me not to come to the airport, because he would make a scene, and we waited outside for the car to come in, and the whole family was there. And then like 6, 7 sons later, like I'm laying in bed 6 o'clock in the morning, and I said, who is ringing the bell at this time of the day? And I opened up the window, and there's this kid that was suitcase. I said, your son's coming home today? What? And then when I came to shul, I said, so he came in, I said, do me a favor, can you take the welcome home sign and hang it up, because if the kids see we missed it, they're going to be upset. As soon as you finish, let me tell you what I need, the garage, I'm waiting for you to clean it out, So I think that because we couldn't communicate so easily, we had to focus on people when we spoke to them, when we wrote letters, and today we lose it because we're so accessible. We don't, which is why davening also, you have to you know what the mile of a cell phone is? That you can close it before davening. You can make a statement, I'm trying to close the world out, and I'm trying to focus on you.
The truth is I could sit with you for for so many for hours to ask you questions. I want to ask you a couple more things that if I ever got a chance to sit with Rabbi Fishel Schachter, I would want to ask. You're a master storyteller. You're a master speaker. I love listening to you. I never get bored. You seem to pull the listener in very quickly, and you just keep them there, engaged. What?
You should have been in my class. You would have a different opinion when I taught 8th grade, but okay.
Somehow I don't think so. But what tips could you give to ordinary people who do speak sometimes in public, or to people who are striving to be talented orators and they want to reach people? What is the key to success?
The key is assess the situation. I always say every speech is 4 speeches. It's a speech you prepare. It's a speech you say. It's a speech like, oh, I could have said better. And it's the speech that people hear. And usually it has no connection to each other. The worst thing is when you come in with a script and you're not connecting to the audience, but you can't get out of your script, and you're just going on and on. You have to have a feel, you have to have a sense, okay?
Do you do that a lot? When you prepare a speech, you come to an event and you totally change course?
100%.
All the time?
Always.
Wow.
My problem is when I want to look up later what I said the year afterwards, I'm looking at these notes and I say, well, that doesn't help me because there's no shaykhs.
That's not what I said.
So Rav Shamshon used to say what goes into your head at the moment is what you're supposed to say. So sometimes you have a feel for something and you want to say, but it happens to me all the time. Yeah, you want to say it, but when I prepare my notes, I'm going to say, okay, there's an opening, there's humor, there's a Dvar Torah and a story, and everything is focused to get that Dvar Torah in. It's all the package, it's all the cream to get it in. Okay, if I stretch that Dvar Torah too long, I lost it. Then I lost it. And what they say about a speech, you need a good beginning and a good end and the smallest distance in between. But to have seichel where you're also, you got to buy a simcha to speak. Right. So no one came there for your speech. So 1, 2, 3, punchline, and sit down. When people are coming you to speak, so you're giving them. You feel where you are. I never talk down to a crowd. Never talk. I think the problem today is if we would wash Nagelwasser properly, it would be different. That may be true, okay? You're not getting the audience that way. Right? Tell them a good funny story about Nagelwasser and then roll it in. You know what I mean? Never a direct 1, 2, 3 punch. Just come around from the back door.
Interesting.
And I always say this, people will call me about a certain thing and I'll start telling a story. They go, where's he going with this? And I said, now I'm on target. Okay? I need people to ask, where's he going? And then I have my little tricks in the trade. When you see people falling asleep, this always works. But don't tell them, this is between us, okay? I always say, the next story, I really should not be repeating publicly. Everyone wakes up. I'm telling you. It's like, I shouldn't be saying this. I hope I don't get in trouble for this.
Everyone pays attention.
Then everyone pays attention. You get certain key words and you get everyone in. And like everything else, it's siyat d'shmaya. So I have this thing, but I like to learn a period mishnayos before I give a speech.
Really? Wow.
You're going to ask why. Because I have found in my career, as with speeches like with everything else, there are times it's great and it's successful, and there are times it flops. And I always found whenever I said, this is such a great speech, I am going to have this crowd, they're going to be, this guy got a standing ovation, they're going to be roaring. Flat. Wow. So I say, okay, in other words, you got to say, Rabbi Shalom, I need you. You got to say, Rabbi Shalom, I need you. So I always say like this, and right before the speech, I want to look over my notes one more time. No, I want a period mishnayos that has no shaykhs to this whatsoever. So the way of saying Rabbi Shalom, I know good and well, okay? The bottom line is, chen means, Rabbi Shamshon says the word chen comes from the word chinam. If people are going to like this, if people are going to like me, if I'm going to be funny, if I'm not going to be funny, the siyat d'shmaya need for humor, for a joke, not to hurt anyone, it's in your hands anyway. I do mine, you do yours. I want to show you that I know it's not up to me. So therefore I'm learning mishnayos now, which I know has no shaykhs to it. I'm doing this and you do yours. I always do it. And if I forget to learn that period mishnayos, I'm telling you, I really believe that. I feel
a special siyat d'shmaya.
Yeah.
Do you have like a Rolodex at home of folders or of stories on topics?
But I can't find them. I'm not a very organized person. But if I was an organized person, I would lose half the stories in this book. And most of the stories are, we're in the bunch of it's every Shabbos, I don't have my keys. That's where most of the stories come from.
So because I would think it's kind of hard.
I do in my head. In my mind, I do.
In my mind, I do. Because someone calls you up, I need you to speak for Kupas something. So right away you have to start.
My problem is when someone says I'm speaking by Shavuos and I can give me a good story and a good joke. I got to get into it. So I feel I got to get into it the way I would get into it for myself.
Right.
But
And sometimes it's hard to give over the story to someone else because part of the chen of the story is you saying it.
Right.
It's not just the story itself, right?
People will, right.
Yeah.
I have this story in the book, this guy that he's a real tough lawyer, and he said, I have to speak my son's bar mitzvah. And I said, no. Don't speak, it's good. I tell you, it's not your thing. No, my wife says, and I have to. So you get up there and you say, just thank you everyone for coming. Thanks Uncle Aaron for coming from Baltimore. Thanks Tante Bertha for not coming, and whatever you say. We go, my wife said, we need some humor. I said, you need humor? You'll speak, that'll be the humor. He said, come on. So I said, you're going to read a joke from a script. It doesn't work. Okay, so I gave him this simple joke. I said, there's bar mitzvah boy, one person brought him a Mishnah Berurah, the other person brought him a kiveg, and one person brought him an umbrella. He said, why are you bringing me an umbrella? I want to bring you something you're going to open. So he gets up there and he goes, I want to tell you this unbelievably, amazingly funny joke. And I'm saying, oh, no. You never start a joke by saying it's going to be a very funny joke. And then he goes, they once gave a bar mitzvah boy an umbrella to open. And people were staring at him, and no one's laughing because they didn't know it was a joke. Now, every speaker knows if a joke falls flat, you don't need to beat a dead horse. You move on, right? So he's going, but you don't get it? They gave him a bar mitzvah umbrella to open. I said, he said, what did I do wrong? I said, first of all, we'll never introduce a joke that is very funny because it will never be very funny. Right. And I said, what makes people laugh is the element of surprise. Okay? If you're expecting him to open a sefer and instead he's opening an umbrella, that may or may not as funny. But if you're starting the joke that he's opening the umbrella, that's nothing funny about opening an umbrella. And then I said to myself, but that's what life is, right? The more we think things are coming to us, we're not happy. What makes us happy?
The surprise element.
Right. God, you don't own me, right? I said that there's these horrible earthquakes, Rahman al-Islam, heart goes out to the people that are suffering. But their whole house caved in on them. The house became their graves. Do you ever think when you walk into a house that it's a gift that your house is standing? Just the least you take for granted, then the happier you are in life. Then you're laughing yourself. Then there's simcha in your own life.
Wow.
That's what I think.
On that note,
yes,
we'll leave with that message. We thank you. Thank you for always being a tremendous source of practical inspiration. You really talk to people. It's dvar ma'yotzim and halev.
Talk to myself. Honestly, I talk to myself.
And I want to thank you, Rebbiton, who came out to join us for this interview to watch.
Okay.
And
Make sure I behave, yes.
Make sure you behave.
Right.
But she is your Ezer, and she's behind 100%,
you. Yes.
And we thank her for her contribution, for allowing you to dedicate yourself to the tzibur, your abatza satira.
Can't do without her, no question about it.
Your chinuch, your stories, your inspiration. You should continue. Okay. Hashem, this should be the first book of many.
Amen.
Hope.
Okay.
And we look forward to continuing to hearing from you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this class.
Thank you for being here.